say, what does it really mean? Because it's a bit of a subjective term. So here's how we're summing it up for you. It's the kind of way that we all want to be getting better at dealing with the falls, and how we get back up, how we respond to that, and the elegance and grace that we might be able to turn these things around, because the falls are always going to happen. We're all going to land on our ass. Uncertainty is going to bring us all to our knees again and again and again as the year rolls out. So do we jump back up like this with the kind of grace and elegance of these wonderful chaps, or are we going to stay on our knees? And that's the question. The answer, of course, is no fucking way. So what do we base the work that we're going to tell you on? I met some of you a year ago when this was a really nascent project exploding into the world. Since then, it is, I don't know which way I'm going. Since then, it is now the world's largest research study in uncertainty tolerance, with over 19,000 people who've participated. And since we met last, we've piloted it over 50 firms that include Apple, Netflix, and Nike. The stuff works. And the reason it works is because we're not looking to the traditional dimensions of leadership. It's not another fucking Elon Musk case study. It is a new aspect on leadership that is informed by ex-gangsters, ex-smugglers, ex-refugees, ex-prisoners of war, ex-homeless, ex-addicts, and people who've been through all manner of transitions of uncertainty, through mental health to gender transition. Real life stories of people whose experience in leadership, and leadership is what we mean, even if it is in the shadows of society, it's leadership nonetheless, who then went on to become leading lights in society. But the stories are the part that always interests me, but luckily it's not just stories. I'll hand over to Katherine for the science that sits behind the uncertainty experts.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to talk over Sam's slides because due to transport, we're not in the same location. However, actually having watched ABBA Voyage last night, the future turns out you don't need bodies. But my name is Conniff Templar-Lewis and I'm a cognitive scientist. I specialize in neuroscience and I've been leading the science behind this show. We've been working out what's going on in people's brains and how to provide people this toolkit that they need to navigate the 21st century. So the first thing we do in any study is we start by finding out what the challenge actually is. And we've asked over 20,000 people, what's keeping you awake at night? Now, here's just some of the answers, and I'm sure we can all resonate with them.
I'm not supposed to be here.
This is your moment to yeah. So if you can mouth this, Sam, I can do your voice. We could do it like that.
Okay, shall I be your AI? Go for it.
You can be my AI, just like in ABBA Voyage. Everything that we found is probably things you'd recognize. You know, people are being kept awake at night by worries about family, worries about job security, worries about finances. You know, it's, should I move house? Can I pay for my house? You know, what's happening to my bills? What's happening to my kids? Now, the thing is, if we go to the workplace, the worries look different, but they actually sit in the same sort of categories. There's instability, unclear priorities, there's rising anxiety. You know, it's been really interesting to me, this word overwhelm. You know, I think burnout was the word we started to really get to grips with over the last couple of years. But now there's this idea of overwhelm. You know, what is this overwhelm? The brain actually doesn't know whether you're at home or at work at any one time. To the brain, these are all moments of uncertainty. And we have a sort of biological hardwired reaction to uncertainty that can be incredibly negative. So what we're going to do and show you over the course of the next 45 minutes, and we have been doing through this show, is changing people's mindsets towards uncertainty so you can go towards it, because that is what people are calling for. You know, everyone we asked said they felt they didn't have the skills and the coping strategies that they need for today's world. You know, people lacked confidence, you know, and this just fed in not just to sort of how you're feeling in terms of well-being, but your ability to make decisions, your ability to hold doubt. Who here feels they can hold doubt at the moment, you know, without feeling weak? We want this shift of perspective. And that's exactly what we're here to do, and what we scientifically have been proving we can do. And that, to me, is exciting. It makes the future an exciting rather than a scary place.
Now, the one thing that never came up when we asked this huge sample, what was keeping them up at night, very few people said the word uncertainty, which might make you think we're in the wrong fucking place. But the interesting thing is whilst most of us are walking around thinking that sleeplessness or work or exhaustion or that difficult meeting we've got to have next week or just the state of the world is what's keeping us awake at night, uncertainty is the thread that joins up all of the challenges we face. And more interestingly than that, it's not just the thread that joins up the challenges, it sits behind the solutions to all of them. So as well as the stories that I'm going to introduce you to and the science that Katherine's going to drop in, we've got a couple of quotes from the people who've gone through the process so far. Because my background, as I can see, some of you have mentioned, thank you, Elizabeth, and I'm very pleased that Elon scored on bingo. So I'm just going to drop in some other words to see if we can win on Marketing Meetup bingo. I might have a guess as to what some of them are. Is the real life stories, because they keep coming back to us on every single day. And we can explain why that surprises us and probably why we need to put them back in. It's some kind of full form of self-validation, because this really is an experiment that came out of the blue. For me, it came out of this. You know, you'll all remember this phase. This is my webinar face. You might be able to see how much I was enjoying the new world of webinars 2 years ago. I was, at that point, best-selling author. In fact, we've brought a couple of books along. For the best, most difficult question, Katherine and I are a big fan of difficult and uncertain questions. Whoever can ask the question that puts us most on the spot wins a book, which I'll post to Joe to send out. The world that I had inhabited at that point, having written this book and was touring the world, talking about it, a business model that relied on travel and rooms full of people wasn't a business model going into lockdown. And my life of uncertainty at that point had hit peak uncertainty, or maybe peak midlife crisis, as I was on the back end of divorce with 2 small children. By the end of that year, I was applying for insolvency and jobs, and I've never done either one. So this was a terrifying, terrifying time. And I went looking for the stories that we've mentioned, people whose perspective on leadership was going to give us something fresh. My background has involved a lot of work in prison systems with young refugees, entrepreneurs that have perhaps been homelessness or in the justice system. And it was them that I turned to, first offering volunteering and then receiving inspiration, because I found my leaders, I found my people, I found the inspiration, the practical guidance for action, people whose lived experience of uncertainty gave us tools that we could work with. And just as I spent the very last of my family savings, I had this idea. It grew out of a webinar like this that I was absolutely hating doing, telling these stories. And it just became clear. There are experts in uncertainty all around us. And so remotely, I started capturing their stories and I started weaving them together. And I was, God damned, it wasn't going to be just another fucking webinar. And so I did an online course about online courses, and I did an online course about documentary making, and decided to launch to the world the world's first ever interactive documentary, scientifically proven to increase your tolerance to uncertainty. And just 2 years ago, this is how it looked.
It's not that I don't feel fear. I most definitely feel fear with everything that I do.
I was scared of being overwhelmed by the darkness, by the uncertainty.
They put the gun against your head, and they pull the hammer back, and you can hear the mechanism squeak.
And if I can become a book, having never done it before, I think it shows that anybody can do things. You just have to build up to it gradually.
For all of humanity's history, the predictor of life outcome has been our ability to deal with the unknown.
And that means that you can create what you can previously create. Now, you know more, so you can do more. You've seen more, so you can be more.
Okay, which brings it back to me. And what was wonderful about that trailer is it's meant to have a backing track, which I don't know why didn't appear there. But the reason why I was disappointed is because we created it with a band called Mashiba, whom when I was 18, I played continuously in my Oxford University room. And so 20 years later, it was wildly exciting to create a new aesthetic soundtrack in which we use dynamics of music to help actually make people sort of produce more alpha waves in their brains so they're more receptive. But that's a whole other story on the trailer. But as you can see from the trailer, these incredibly powerful stories. And it was those stories that, to me, were the most important aspect of when I met Sam, why I wanted to be involved in this project. As Joe and I discussed earlier, stories are fundamentally the most powerful way for us to learn. You know, I spent my life as this scientist trying to sort of be cool, but actually science isn't very cool. I mean, it is in terms of its expansive thinking, but it's often very reductive. It's done in tiny labs on like ridiculously like old, you know, Mac 95s and old plastic chairs, and it's not involved in the real world. And so much of my work is an understanding that we need to take scientists out into the real world to help us understand how to navigate. And that was the opportunity that Sam presented me when we met a couple of years ago. He said, I have these incredible stories and I need you to help understand how these people navigate uncertainty, what their minds do, what skills they have, so that we can take those skills and teach them to other people. And so I did. I assembled a sort of, it was like Marvel's Assemble, all the superheroes assembled, from the sort of Finnish empathy designer to the Finnish government to professors of social psychology. And we took these stories and we looked at what the skill sets were, the mindsets were of these people to allow them to navigate uncertainty so that we could teach them to everybody. We set it up. It was a documentary, an interactive 3-part documentary that we set up like a giant science experiment. And we tested people before and after, and the results were incredible. They're more powerful than any psychological intervention that I'd come across in my entire 20 years of working in behavioral psychology and neuroscience. And we published this paper with CIPD about how powerful these stories and this interactive format, media format, could be to transform people's ability to navigate uncertainty. We were even invited to speak at the Royal Society, one of the most prestigious institutions, to talk to policymakers about the importance of understanding the place of stories and emotions in decision-making and leadership. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to show you that same sort of glimpse of that mindset. Because actually, if you Google uncertainty, if you do a semantic review on uncertainty, about 94% of the time, a negative word comes after it. We have this allergy to uncertainty. And we need to turn it into this positive place. Because when we do, our body and our mind allows us to go into uncertainty rather than retract and run away from it. It's a basic survival mechanism. So how do we turn it into this positive, pink, sort of happy place? Well, first of all, we need to understand what uncertainty does to us. So we're going to ask one of you, I can't get you up on stage, we're not on stage, but we've got an amazing bit of spyware, which is going to hack someone's camera and bring you up and pin you to the front so you can play a little experiment with me. If you don't, just turn your camera off if you don't want to be chosen. But for any brave souls.
Are you ready, Katherine? Do you want me to launch it?
Yes, please. Let's bring someone up.
There's some brave students of Katherine's from Goldsmith specializing in AI and tech. You'll see the countdown go, and then it will see who's got the weakest security, and it will begin to pick. It's Screen to Spy, if you've ever heard of that. It's quite well documented. And it looks like it's a Nicole. Is there a Nicole M? Nope, too much security. It's gone to Hannah S. Oh, look, Joe G, it might be coming to you, Joe. Bad security. Elizabeth, nope. It's looking for someone else. You're going to come on screen, so camera's off if you're naked. We wouldn't do that to you, it's illegal. But we did do it the other day, and we saw nearly a third of the people dropped off the call. So I hope that we haven't lost anybody right now. We just wanted to give you that slight sensation of uncertainty. And I know many of you can feel it because, there's a reason why public speaking is people's least favorite thing in the world, because we're being presented in front of our peers. It suggests that horrible feeling of possibly being in the out group, and that gives us that threat response, which is what uncertainty is so connected to, because that feeling, and I'd like you to try and hold on to that feeling, to have a sense of what it looks like, to see where it was in your body. Well, Katherine and I sum up as this, the glass cage of emotions, that kind of sense of trappedness. And as Katherine explains the detailed and knowledgeable science, what I can do is pick up as best I can what I've learned over these last 2 years, because I'm non-academic. I didn't make it to university. And the things that stay in my mind are the stories out of this. And my favorite story out of the scientific research that I saw was this piece of research with over 700 participants who were encouraged to play a game that was created a real sense of uncertainty, just like we did there. And you were given a choice between the feeling of uncertainty and giving yourself an electric shock. And with remarkable accuracy, the vast majority of people continuously gave themselves an electric shock. And this is played out in less humorous environments. It's shown consistently people who are expecting a negative health diagnosis, particularly in terminal illnesses, would prefer to receive a negative diagnosis than stay in the space of the unknown. But that's how profoundly uncomfortable we find uncertainty. And that's why it's so profoundly important. And there's a reason for this, right? It goes down to our evolutionary threat responses. So everyone here has heard of the fight, flight, and freeze response, right? Everyone knows that. Did you know there's actually 7 Fs in the fight, flight, freeze evolutionary response to uncertainty? There is fawn, that makes sense. You can kind of acquiesce your way out of danger. Then there's feed. We've all been there, feeling hungry or wanting a snack when we're feeling nervous. There's fuck. That's probably not like in the lexicon of techniques at work when we're feeling uncertain. In fact, none of them are really. I mean, it's remarkable, isn't it, that evolution can give us 7 responses and alliterate them. But none of them are that appropriate in 2023. So this is why our work, we feel, is necessary, because the uncertainty is certain, it's not going to stop. So if we don't want to just respond with these, if those don't feel like they're going to fit into your career path, then what are we going to do as a result? We have to shift this to something new.
So what is this difference? You know, we all sort of fundamentally understand that whilst uncertainty causes huge anxiety, it also is the place of great innovation. You know, it's in times of uncertainty that we have been our very best as individuals, as societies. So what is the difference? Well, the difference is one psychological factor that sits inside your brain in the non-conscious part, the habitual part of the wiring of your brain, and it's called uncertainty tolerance. Like many of the sort of psychometric measures you might have come across, uncertainty tolerance is a measurable trait. I can measure any one of you today where your uncertainty tolerance sits. But the more important thing to me is that it's malleable as well. Some people have very high uncertainty tolerance, some people have low, but they can change it to high, whether that's through stories, as you'll see, or life events. And high is where we want to get in this day and age, because if you have low uncertainty tolerance, you're more likely to basically try and solve uncertainty at any moment. And that leads to conflict and tension. It leads you to grasping onto backwards looking narratives, to dogmatic approaches. It means you can't collaborate very well or incorporate new ideas. People have high uncertainty tolerance. They're very calm and they can approach uncertainty, and they can remain in that space of uncertainty in order to find new perspectives and answers. This is the space where we can be agile, creative. It's also the place where we're less anxious, because low uncertainty tolerance really drives anxiety. And you may think that you have pretty high. Most people of us do actually overestimate where our uncertainty tolerance sits on any particular day. But most of the people that we actually tested, of thousands of people, had medium to low or low. So if it's not you, it's people around you, it's clients you're working with, and that really impacts both our well-being, but also our ability to make decisions and be creative. But the best bit about uncertainty tolerance is the higher yours is, the more you can lift your team up. It tends to be that you can actually elevate other people's uncertainty tolerance. And that's the space that we're going to.
And, oh, didn't expect to come back out. I don't know what's going on there. Oh, look, tiny me. Hi, tiny me has come to say the next bit. Wow. That's thrown me. You'd think I'd be better at that kind of uncertainty. I was going to say how much I'd enjoyed the comments about the kinds of, oh, look, there we go, we're back. The kinds of uncertainty and where you felt it. Ben's in his dressing gown. Is that you, Ben Hume? Someone else eating their toast. Hi, Kimberly. Fiona felt scared. There were people feeling it in their palms. So there's some really interesting things that come out there, right? If you feel the fear in your stomach, that's because your body is moving blood away from digestion of your breakfast to push it to your legs or arms to fight or flight. If you felt it in your chest, it was your lungs getting greater capacity to breathe so that you were ready again for action. On your skin, it means you were going into hyper awareness, using your skin as a radar to see if there are any other threats around you, which is why it's so important to understand those places that you feel it, because you'll become better at understanding it and taming it. But uncertainty tolerance is within. And this is my favorite trick that was taught to me by the head of experimental psychology at UCL that Katherine introduced to the project. Big fan of uncertainty experts. And this is a trick to find out where your uncertainty tolerance sits. It's actually where all your biases sit. So I'd like you to join me in another experiment. No one's going to get on screen for this one. Could you please take your pointy finger, right hand, left hand, I don't mind. Excellent. Okay, great. Got you, Joe. Could you now move it to your forehead? You might need to move your cap. Not necessary. You can do it on your cap if you want. And I'm going to ask you to draw a letter Q, a capital letter Q. So that's a circle with a little tail on it. Okay, everyone with me to check the messages if everyone can do this. If you're writing a message, it means you're probably not doing what you're supposed to be doing. So, yep. Okay, good. Now, did you, let's take a sense, who drew the Q to their left eye? Who drew the tail of the Q to their left eye? Joe did. All right, Joe, good man. So that means you drew the Q for me. I'm not surprised, actually, Joe. These people are shown to have higher levels of empathy. So you drew the Q for my benefit. Looking at you, thank you very much, darling. Sadly, you're statistically shown to be better at lying. Okay, which perhaps isn't surprising from a marketing community. We should be good at both lying and telling the truth. Who drew it to the right-hand side? Right-hand side. Okay, right-hand side is very interesting as well. Right-hand side, team right. Here we go. It's the right-hand crew. Now, you drew the Q for yourself. God damn it. You didn't care about me, Joe or Catherine. You see yourself very squarely, firmly in the world, and you look out upon your own Q. You are shown to have lower levels of empathy, interestingly. So the point there, right, it's a fun way of understanding that we all have these natural biases, and you can see how that informs the decisions that we were already making anyway. And that's where uncertainty tolerance sits. So like it or not, you have an uncertainty tolerance, and it is affecting every single decision you make, every creative decision you make, every collaboration you enter into. And there are really good other proxies for uncertainty as well, or how the brain works in uncertainty. This is one of my favorites. If you could please gaze towards this, the crosshair here, okay? What can we see? Entirely pink dots, right? The brain has now registered that. The brain's no longer going to absorb this information. There's about 4 hours in a day when the eyes stop sending information to the brain, because the brain's like, don't worry, I've got it. Often happens when we're driving. And now we start the balls moving, but the brain doesn't worry about that because it thinks it's got all the information. And tell me, if something happens, does a different color, does an aspect of the pattern begin to change? Can anybody see? Yeah, Diane's got it, right? Green dot, yeah. Now there's no green dot there. I can pause it. No green dot whatsoever. So this is a concern. So we rely on heuristics a lot, or our wisdom or experience. Certainly senior people in marketing do. However, the danger there is when we use a rule of thumb. This is our brain, an incredible energy-saving device, just going back to what it already knows. So when we're pushed into uncertainty, our brain is more likely to respond to patterns that it's seen before, making us less able to spot the nuances that uncertainty can teach us. Now, that brings us to a real challenge, right? In times of uncertainty, is experience wisdom or is it laziness? On this one, how about this? Important for you marketeers, who can see the white triangle in the midst of the screen? Yep, lots of us. Okay, there is no white triangle there. Look closer. There is no white triangle. There is just negative space. The brain's desire to see patterns. We are pattern-seeking missiles. There was a recent really great study that I enjoyed. Humans were set up against rats with randomized lights, and rats were better than humans because humans consistently decided that there were patterns where there weren't any patterns. So this is us again. So as marketeers looking for new space, looking for places of new ideas, we're more prone to see patterns where there aren't any than we are able to stay in negative space being the proxy for uncertainty, right? And you know how important being able to stay in negative space is, or look to the edges. It's where most of our best ideas will come from. So that's a little glance internally, how we operate with uncertainty. Let's look externally. Well, we know the forecast for the next few years, for marketeers certainly, is endless uncertainty. Nothing else is on the horizon. So what the fuck are we going to do about it? We need some skills for how we can begin to tolerate it. Well, that's where uncertainty tolerance, we believe, comes in, because it's what's known scientifically as a transdiagnostic. It sits behind multiple issues. When they first discovered uncertainty tolerance is when they were looking into anxiety, because it's the number one driver of anxiety. But if you want to work on decision-making, uncertainty tolerance. If you want to work on problem solving, creativity, open-mindedness, uncertainty tolerance. If you want to increase resilience and emotional well-being, I'm falling off the screen here, then it's uncertainty tolerance. You see, it connects them all. And this stat we pulled in this morning that fits to you guys, this. Let me see if I can identify. Here we go. Right, so I shall make myself the cursor. And this little pad here, you see this line. This is the correlatory line between uncertainty avoidance and global innovation. And these little pink dots are 100 different global economies. So you can see, if you want to be up this end of innovation, you need to have a good level of uncertainty tolerance. If you are uncertainty avoidant, oh dear, you can find yourself all the way down here. Right, it's enough of that. So we're checking back in with the stories that we've heard along the way before I pass back over to Katherine to explain something that we've developed. Last year, when we first met, we just kind of got our heads around uncertainty tolerance, and Katherine has taken us to a whole other place of understanding.
We have indeed, because whilst we're aware that there is this scale of uncertainty tolerance, which basically measures how anxious you get in uncertainty, and the more anxious you are about something, the more you'll avoid it. We actually want to go beyond that and explore how able we are to turn uncertainty into a place of opportunity. So these amazing professors at UCL who we've been working with put together 5 different psychological dimensions that actually tell us not just how anxious or not you get in uncertainty, but how able you are to stay in that space and turn it into a place of creativity, which is what the real aim of this documentary series was. We don't want to just reduce your anxiety. We want to be you able to leave and go straight into uncertainty and be excited about it. These are the very boring names of the entire of the 5 dimensions, things like the new general self-efficacy scale. If anyone wants to take some time out and come and rebrand the entire of science, they're most welcome, because it's desperately in need of an update and a rebranding. You know, the professors are even freaking out that Sam puts pink in his slide decks. It's too radical a color for us. But what does that actually mean for how I live my life? Well, it actually means, how brave can I be in uncertainty? How long can I stay in a place of doubt and hold my ground to explore new opportunities? How resilient can I be? And that actually means, how quickly can I get back up after a knockback in uncertainty and be able to sort of go again? And my agility, how able is my mind to think of new perspectives, to be able to deal with ambiguous questions and disordered solutions? My mindset, because emotions is so important in decision making. You know, that's a huge revelation in neuroscience, that emotions drive our decision making or limit us. And our agency, which is so important. How much do I believe I have the ability to navigate uncertainty? Because that will determine whether or not I choose to. So these are the scales we've been measuring, and we've been measuring people before and after watching the show. And the results have been phenomenal. We have increased people's uncertainty tolerance and shown over long term, you know, we do a longitudinal study, that these are skill sets that apply to everyday life, have this permanent change in the way we approach uncertainty.
I'm really enjoying how much everyone wants to be more cursor. And that could be our next exploration and project. And I can certainly show you how to do all manner of daft things along the way. But as Katherine said, if we left this to science on their own, and the decision-making uncertainty lab has existed for 10 years, has anybody heard it? No. But since the financial collapse, their job was to try and work out why industries who were supposed to be good at making predictions fail to make predictions. Marketing is supposed to be good at making predictions. So how do we get better at making predictions? They came up with some brilliant work, but they weren't able to actualize it into the real world, which is where the uncertainty experts came in. So we took all this incredible research, all this brilliant understanding, and we turned it into a documentary, the world's first interactive documentary where stories took center stage. And to give you a sense of how that kind of looks and feels, we were able to get Time Out along to the premiere, who gave us a 5-star review, and they sent their global film editor to capture it. So here in 60 seconds is the Time Out review of the world's first psychological intervention. There's also an entertainment format.
I'm Dave Calhoun. I'm the Global Deputy Editor-in-Chief at Time Out. So I see a lot of documentaries, films at film festivals, or ones that agree. And I definitely, like, having gone through the uncertainty experts, it's definitely a format and an experiment in documentary making that I haven't encountered before. So it's somewhere between watching a really intense documentary, which is, opening your eyes up to, the world and to yourself, and a really intense kind of like educational workshop, on a subject that you really, really care about. And here, the subject that you really, really care about turns out to be yourself. I found it unexpectedly moving. Actually, it's a fun science experiment that's rooted in a really quite wild, like, creative filmmaking / live event approach.
I like the way the chat went to Dave's books. That's good. So I know the question probably, so we've still got prizes for the best question that we're going to ask. We're nearly through the main part of the presentation, but so that we don't waste time on the questions that we already know that you're going to ask, we get this a lot. So the question mainly probably on your minds is, this all sounds very interesting, but what the fuck actually is it? And that was the first comment that we ever got when we put this out in the world. I'm still receiving it, so I definitely need some marketing help, because I do know that interactive documentary, scientifically proven to increase your tolerance for uncertainty, isn't very catchy, and I'm in theory a marketer. So let's show you a brief glimpse of what takes place in the show. I went out and found what I call uncertainty experts, individuals who learned the arts of uncertainty in the shadows and went on to become leading lights in society. So there's a moral arc to their journey. For instance, Carl Loco, who grew up in inner city South London, was predicted Oxbridge grades, but his best friend was murdered outside the school just before his GCSEs. Carl fell out of education, fell into local gangs, running with the local gangs, and ended up running the local gangs. On the front page of the Evening Standard, he was heralded as London's #1 gang leader until his natural intelligence and emotional ability got the better of him, and he started running programs to get kids out of gangs. That led to a life of community enterprise, social enterprise, being picked up by Branson, backed by Prince Harry, and now runs a multi-million-pound incubator fund for young Black inner city entrepreneurs. So because as Katherine said earlier on, we've got these kind of key insights coming out. So we know that the fear, that feeling of uncertainty that you all had earlier on, everyone described it as a sense of fear. So the first set of questions I asked to Carl was around how he managed and overcame the fear of uncertainty when he was in gangs and the same kind of techniques he uses in boardrooms to overcome it and turn it into a place of opportunity, creativity, problem solving, and decision making. So for about 60 seconds, and I apologize because I heard the comments earlier on that there's a bit of a reverb. So you're just going to have to listen in. And what we'll do is, if anyone can't hear it, we'll share a link with Joe if you can't get this clip. But for 60 seconds, please meet Carl Loco.
I had friends on the streets that was more violent than myself, had more money than me, but no one was more courageous. That was my identity. It was Locks is never scared, you know, and I was always scared. But I literally would feel it in my stomach. I could feel it. It got to a point where I could pinpoint where the fear was on my body. I'm just more afraid of regret. I'm more afraid of not leaving a legacy. I am more afraid of not contributing. I am more afraid of not moving the dial. I am more afraid of not breaking the generational curses. What if I'm 50, 60, whatever age, and looking back and like, I didn't move on that when I could have. And then this looming poison that we call regret, I almost stoke that fire. I almost enhance it. You know, I'm like, you don't want that one. That one there, that syringe is the dirty one. If that goes, that's going to really hurt, you know? So don't, just move.
So that's Carl with his incredible, incredible stories. But what we want to do is really understand why he had such high uncertainty tolerance, and everything is there, he tells us. And the reason why we wanted to teach people these stories is because we know through neuroplasticity, once you start to understand different behavior patterns and practice them yourselves, your brain fundamentally changes. That's how uncertainty tolerance works. You develop a natural higher tolerance to uncertainty. So throughout the show, we actually ask people questions, because if we're going to pull things out of our non-conscious brain and reframe them and rewire them, we need to be aware of how we're operating. It's like you need to see the coding in your brain. So throughout the series, QR codes come up and we ask people these incredible questions, which were designed by this empathy designer and take a lot from CBT. Carl talks in that little clip about how he feels fear in his body. It's a skill known as interoception. It's a very new concept in neuroscience. But what the basis of it is the knowledge that the more we can feel and recognize fear, amazingly, the more we can control it and the less it disrupts our thinking. So we teach people to better understand and feel their fear. The second thing that he says in that tiny clip is he actually does a thing called cognitive restructuring. He reframes his thinking to drive him towards uncertainty rather than away. I'll just give you a moment there to have a think about what fear holds you back. And here's the next question. What regret do you most want to avoid? So Carl looks at this and we hear him talk about regret and we hear him talk about fear. And we asked about near on 19,000 people these questions. Everything we ask is anonymous. I need to say that for the ethics of UCL. But what happened was this. About 91% of people said their fear of failure. And when you were thinking about it, probably you came up with something around failure. That's a very human way to respond to uncertainty. But 89% of people also said the regret they most feared was missed opportunity. When Carl in that little clip spoke, he spoke about thinking about those two things in parallel. We very rarely do that. Yes, he was afraid of failing, but he also recognized in that moment that he didn't want to miss an opportunity. And by actually reframing his thinking, it allowed him to go towards uncertainty rather than away. And this is just a really simple cognitive tool, a cognitive exercise that you can do in a moment of uncertainty that actually changes your relationship with that moment of uncertainty and can fundamentally then change your actions in uncertainty. So these are just a few of the tools we teach people. We go through the series, we look at negativity bias as well, which I have to say, I have to have a shout out for negativity bias, because our natural negativity bias is 1 in 10. That means 9 out of 10 times we assume the worst. But in this modern day era, mainly because of a lot of the negative news that is always circulating around us, they think that our cognitive bias, negativity bias, has gone up to 1 in 200, which means that 199 times out of 200, we're assuming the worst. And that's going to really alter your behavior. So these are the tiny aspects, dimensions of uncertainty tolerance that we're playing with, the tools that we're teaching you in order to increase your uncertainty tolerance. Oh, this, I didn't know this slide was in. This is exciting. I was about to hand over to Siam, but wait, this is one of my favorite stats, in fact.
I wouldn't take out your favorite slide.
Did you not take? I thought you took this out. Brilliant. Okay, get out of the way. Let me talk about this. So it turned out, this is the National Science Foundation study, that we can have up to 60,000 thoughts a day. So this is expanding on this idea of our negativity bias and how much it can limit us, and how in the show we want to reframe it. But 80% of those thoughts are negative, and worse than that, 90% of your negative thoughts are the same as the ones you had yesterday, but only 1 to 2% will ever come true. And out of those that do come true, so stealing focus now, 95% of people said that the worries that came true led to growth. It's an amazing fact. We actually extrapolated it beyond this into time about, now this is not a National Science Foundation study, this is me using a calculator, but if you translate that into time, it means that even if you had 8 hours sleep last night, you're going to have about 15 minutes today where you're usefully worrying, and about 13 hours of thoughts where you're just wasted worry, and 12 hours will be the same worries you had yesterday. That's 3.5 days a week. So technically, if you increase your uncertainty tolerance, and which reduces your negativity bias, you could technically, theoretically, buy back 19 hours just to having higher uncertainty tolerance. So what would you do for 19 hours? I'd probably just sleep. That's probably what I'd do. But these are the sort of levers we're trying to change people's fundamental relationship with the way they live their lives. So the impact's not just their work life, but also their home life as well. All right, Sam, you can go back now.
Thanks. The slides are coming from my camera. So if you want to see the slides as we're going through, you can pin me as the presenter, and that should keep them up on your screen. Katherine is dialed in from East London, and she will narrate over the slides. But as Joe said, we can probably put an edit together with the audio that was missing, so you get everything all in one go. Right, so what we learned is that embracing uncertainty turns it into a generative force. As we said at the beginning, 95% of the times we see uncertainty, it scares us, and that's understandable. Because we've done this as such a large sample study, we asked everybody how uncertainty makes them feel. With nearly 20,000 responses, what's interesting is that 98% of the responses we get are people using negative terms, adjectives like anxious or fretful or worried. So we started to group the feelings that uncertainty causes. We've got to remember, right? The approach to uncertainty has to be psychobiological, thought and felt, brain and body. So as we grouped these words, they fell into 3 categories. And the categories were, firstly, fear. So the words like anxiety, panic, and worry, we grouped as fear. That was the largest category. The second group of words were confused. I feel closed-minded. I'm going in circles. So we called that fog. And the third group was I'm just stuck. I've lost my mojo. And everybody felt something like this. And so fear, fog, and stasis summed up the human experience of uncertainty. So we'll talk about remote working, and we'll talk about the challenges of it. And that's all very real, but that is surface level. That's symptomatic. The emotional impact of uncertainty behind the scenes for us, for our family, for our friends, for our teams, for the people we want to work with, for our clients, is fear, fog, and stasis. And as a non-scientist, as you now know, as this work has been published, I am so pleased that my contribution to science is an acronym as good as this. That really, really fucking cheered me up. So then what we do is we built our documentary on this basis. So fear, fog, and stasis is episode 1, 2, and 3. I introduced the stories of the uncertainty experts, and Katherine takes us through the techniques that take us there. And I'll go back to being a cursor, because to wrap up, I'd like to show you what happened with all of this. So the certainty approach to fear, you might not be able to see this too clearly, but fear on the whole, what we had clients coming towards us were asking for courage. And I saw this mentioned, the feel the fear and do it anyway. We disagree with that. Feel the fear and do it anyway is a shortcut to burnout and further anxiety. It's a horrible feeling to be scared and have to do it anyway. Down here, the uncertainty approach, in response to fear, the answer is emotional regulation, to learn techniques to calm you the hell down. So the true answer is feel the fear and use emotional regulation, because you can't overcome fear, you can't deny fear, but you can turn it to a driver for growth and action. Similarly, where's my cursor gone? Similarly, in the space of fog, the clients would come to us, and you can imagine this. I've had enough of this confusion. We need clarity. We need certainty. All right, great. Yeah. Well, then what happens then? We have this narrative to think big, think different, but we know what ends up. We end up refreshing old ideas or stealing ideas or just outsourcing ideas, right? That's not the way forward. So down here, the answer to fog is to increase our uncertainty tolerance, which then means we increase our ability to stay in negative space and our ability to gather negative perspectives, different perspectives from our own. Uncertainty tolerance means we can spend time with people we disagree or even dislike. That then leads us to a greater level of open-mindedness, and what we measure is an increase in people's agility and adaptiveness. And the last one, and then we'll conclude for questions. My cursor. I'm going to start cursing my cursor. Fuck you, cursor. That sense of stasis that holds us back, right? Of course, what people wanted, and we had clients come to us, I've had enough of this, we want to get back into fifth gear. You've heard it, right? The phrase is just do it. No, that is the fastest track to burnout. If you are stuck and feeling stuck, just forcing yourself to move will trip you up. What we were surprised by, the way through stasis, the skill needed is intuition, is to turn internally. The philosophy is to trust your gut. And what we showed again and again in the world's largest piece of research into this, the way out of feeling stuck in times of horrible uncertainty, and I'm sorry for all of you who have been here, I know we're rushing through this stuff, is a sense of connection. Connection to self, connection to others, connection to purpose, connection to meaning, connection to community. That's why we're here. This is a community that I love and respect, and I know how supportive it is. And that sense of connection is what will bring us through. So as we've peppered this with stories of the real people who've gone through this one kind of sums it up. Everyone comes to uncertainty experts as a piece of professional development. And then we discover that uncertainty doesn't give a shit about our work lives. And as we saw from the questions that Catherine's asked, it affects all of our lives. And so consistently in the exit interviews we get, people talk about, yeah, it helped me at work, but where it really helped me was in the other areas of uncertainty, which I think is essential, because I refer to it as the worry go round, right? We worry about work when we're at home, we worry about home when we're at work. And so an ability, like we said before, that uncertainty is transdiagnostic, sitting beneath it all, changes everything. And so the end result, and this is the gift to you guys in marketing and looking for new ideas, is that when you begin to get a handle on it, when you begin to start using it, uncertainty becomes a technology in itself, a toolkit for exploring possibility. That's where we've got to it now, and where we are planning to take it next. And where we take it next is an invitation to you. And this is not in any way meant as a sell. This is something we discussed with Joe, and we don't want to use this as a platform to promote our wares. But on June the 6th, we are beginning a live cohort, which is free to NHS workers, if you know any. Our ambition is to see if we can roll this out and get a similar response for the NHS, which has the highest level of burnout and the lowest rate of innovation per head. We're going to start running it as a cross-subsidy model. So as we sell it into other corporates, as we do that, we'll make more and more spaces free for NHS workers. And beyond the NHS, we want to go into education and young people. If we can increase the uncertainty tolerance and have the same impact that we can in those communities that we have in corporate communities, we have a chance to make a huge difference to societies and communities that are going to go through ever more uncertainty. So if you would like to, as long-term fans of the Marketing Meetup, we put a 30% discount on it, but please don't feel any pressure to whatsoever. On our website, there's a free uncertainty tolerance test. There's loads of resources. There's loads of the talks that me and Catherine have done, and you'll draw lots and lots and lots from that. If you know anyone who's having an extremely hard time, by the way, we have a discount code for anyone who's a student, out of work, in between work, frontline workers. There's 80% off. Just put cheers, the word cheers in. Or if it's something that maybe you can expense or you can take to work, then please feel free. But don't feel any pressure. We just want to make this work, this opportunity, this chance to grow in response to uncertainty available. And if we're going to make it available anywhere, then this is definitely a community we want to offer it up to. So that's us with 11 minutes left here and ready to answer any questions and prizes, of course, for the best questions.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you both sincerely, and also thank you to the community for contributing throughout. It was a really lively chat feature today, and in the best way possible. So I think it was fabulous. I just want to pick up on Sarah's chat comment here, who said, "This has genuinely been one of my favorite presentations of all time." So thank you very much. I think,
thank you, Sarah.
I think we win. So thank you very much. Last one from Alex, who says this has been such a thought-provoking presentation. And I think we need a whole video demonstration on how to become a cursor as well, because that was a real hit. Honestly, also in the Q&A, there's 17 open questions right now. And like there's some of the most thoughtful questions that we've ever had from TMM. So please do take, this is horrendously distracting, but in the most wonderful way. It's going to be such a confusing podcast, but let's get into it. Folks, if you're watching in and you've got a question that you like in the Q&A, make sure to give it a thumbs up, because we'll make sure to prioritize those in the time that we've got remaining. So the number one question that the community's asked relates to neurodiversity. And so Samantha asks, can neurodiverse people increase their uncertainty tolerance, or is it hardwired? And I'll throw that out to both of you.
We've both got a view on this, but I think, Katherine, you should kick off, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting question, and something that came out of doing, we rolled this out a lot in sort of workplaces, and we kept hearing time and time again people saying, I have a daughter, I have a son, I have a friend who is ASD or neurodivergent, and this would be really good for them. So we're now actually looking closer at how this could help people who do potentially have a higher anxiety level around moment of uncertainties. And it seems, just at the moment from case studies, that it is having positive impact. Now, I would love to dig in a bit, firstly, to actually allow the course to be catered more towards neurodivergent individuals, but also to see how we could actually, like with young people, potentially focus in on some of these groups, because there are certain individuals who get very anxious around uncertainty, and hopefully this is proving to be quite a useful tool for them as well. Sam, over to you.
And my work before this in being a pilot and with young people that very much focused around neurodivergence. I've had a diagnosis later in my life, but I've always been aware that I thought differently and struggled with dyslexia. It's one of the reasons I wrote a book, and one of the reasons why I still have a chip on my shoulder about academia. So we work with consultants throughout the process. Lots of people have asked this question, so we've invited people to come onto the program and guide us and help us shape it. The challenge is it's deliberately designed to make you feel uncertain. There's lots of tricks like we've had today to make you feel a certain way. So it isn't for everyone. We've got to say we either get 10 out of 10 or 2 out of 10. Right? People love it or they hate it, and I kind of think that's good and right. But what we are trying to push at is the neurodiversity debate has yet to get to its full maturity and realize the challenges, but also the benefits of people thinking genuinely differently. And that's something the show tries to really embrace, because our uncertainty experts are very representative of neurodiversity, and they speak about it and they champion it and they challenge it and they refer to it again and again, how it increased their opportunity and their ability to spot opportunity uncertainty.
Lovely. Thank you very much. That's really appreciated, and I think that will be both reassuring and useful for a bunch of folks. So thank you. There's a bunch of questions, and they're going to ping pong from one place to another. So I hope you don't mind that. So the next one comes from Paul, the lovely Paul, who says, "Have you found any correlation between people who have quote unquote undergone shit that has caused a greater sense of ongoing uncertainty, such as chronic illness, that means they handle all forms of uncertainty more easily? I guess, is there an uncertainty hierarchy?"
Great question.
Yeah, Paul's a thoughtful guy. Good questions.
So I can say something from my point of view of doing the research, because I uncovered the first characters. So there I was falling apart, felt like I was falling apart, and I started offering my time to volunteer to young entrepreneurs who were also struggling. I've always believed that if you need to get strength, you need to give strength. And when I put this call out, young entrepreneurs, I'll give you my time, I got loads of calls from CEOs, people in my professional network, and they were like, I know I'm not a young person, but I'm really falling apart. And it just became really clear to me, the young people I was seeking to help didn't need my help. In fact, I drew more from them. The guys who'd been in prison, the guys who'd been refugees, they were giving me advice. They were already far more responsive. They maintained a much better level of humor. Some of them said things like, I've already seen the shit, so I'm not scared of shit. Versus the guys who were in that kind of pressure zone and who the uncertainty felt like it was falling apart. And so the disparity became really clear. And then on a daily basis, the leadership we were seeing didn't seem honest enough to me to be able to answer the only real way that we can at the moment, which is, I don't know. But hopefully, in a sense of communities like this, I don't know, but I know people that I can work it out with. And that's the only real answer. I think that's for the rest of our career, certainly, that's going to be the best answer we can have. I do not know, and I'm willing to stay in that space of doubt and discovery, but I know great people, and together we can work it out. And so that's what I went looking for. And yes, once I'd understood these drivers more, met Katherine, the scientist she'd introduced me to, it's not well known why some people go to post-traumatic stress and some people go to post-traumatic growth. We believe the difference now is uncertainty tolerance. And that's why we're doing this work. But our ambitions are to go much, much further than this. You know, it affects political outcomes. We fall for more binary outcomes, and we know what that means in our country. We're more prone to extremist ideologies and conspiracy theories. So there's a huge impact that this work can have. And our goal now is to really take it out to an institutional and a societal level. Because yes, we believe the more we can increase uncertainty tolerance will compound the benefits to us as individuals, societies, organizations, and communities.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I'll just add from the data that we've got so far, just our internal data set, which is huge and global, one of the biggest data sets I've ever worked with in science. It does seem to be that younger people have a low uncertainty tolerance at the moment, which does make sense and does correlate with what you're just saying, because a lot of people who have gone through adversity, it naturally increases their high uncertainty tolerance. So what we're trying to do and hoping to do, which is why we're very interested in young people, but anybody, is we don't want you'd have to go through a huge challenge, and although all of us actually probably have in our lives, but to learn the skills to navigate it from other people's stories. You know, a lot of the characters are quite extreme and uncertainty experts, but it's not that we want you to relate to them, but learn from them and apply it to our own life. So we're hoping to expedite everybody's uncertainty tolerance so that they don't have to go through something really bad first.
That would be a lovely outcome, and I sat here and I'm sure that so many folks we're listening in, sort of like really sort of intrigued to check it out, and fearful also of, sort of going through the bad. So to sort of expedite that process sounds like a really lovely and useful sort of outcome for sure. Let's take the next one from Paul, because that was the next one thumbed up. Folks, if we've only got a few minutes remaining, so if you've got some questions that you really want answering, make sure to give them a thumbs up so we prioritize them. So Paul asks, how much of someone's inbuilt ability to manage uncertainty is based on any work they may have done on themselves and their own self?
Great question. I can, I'll tell you my journey of how I got there, and then Katherine backs up with science. So I was so adamant not to finish the series with bloody Buddhists. But everything I read kept coming back to this, this Buddhist notion that there's only two things you can be damn well sure of to happen. Like people say, don't they? The only guarantees in life are death and taxes, but it turns out taxes are highly avoidable. Thank you, Amazon. So the only truism is that it's death and uncertainty. And Pema Chodron, the Buddhist nun, asks us, when are you going to grow up and embrace this? Or how long are you going to live in denial and fear? And it just fucking stopped me. Anyway, so Katherine introduced me to Dean Donalds, who was once abandoned as a baby, a young Jamaican baby abandoned in a Middle England white, racist, violent life that he grew up into, and is now the highest ranked Dharma light carrier, which is basically Gandalf in the Buddhist tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh. He's our final uncertainty expert. And he joins the most cutting edge neuroscience Katherine had introduced me to ancient wisdom, which does come down to knowing ourselves. And it's a great way to finish the series and to shut me up. Katherine, what do you think?
No, I think that's a great answer, actually, and it just brings some things that have come up in the chat that we haven't addressed, and that Dean, I met Dean, and I really, if anyone came near me and said the word yoga, I'd sort of run a mile. And but doing a lot of neuroscience on Buddhists, they have this amazing uncertainty tolerance. And some of the things that we teach throughout the series touch on that Buddhists have obviously known for thousands of years, the world is fundamentally uncertain. Neuroscientists are now coming to grips with, how do we navigate this time? And although it's said that this is the most uncertain time in all of human history, of course, the world has always been uncertain. It's just that we're exposed to so many more micro moments. We're inundated by so many more psychological uncertainties compared to the physical, more immediate uncertainties we used to have to face. So that's how our uncertainty has gone up. And there's different tools that I think are really lovely within this, and things like intuition. In episode 3, we really, and I know someone put a comment about intuition, and intuition, we're now understanding that mind-body connection and being able to tap into our intuition and fine-tune it. It's this incredible decision-making skill. And that's something mindfulness and breathing practices in Buddhism have always known. In the same, this idea of the body and being able to regulate fear is about recognizing our fear. And we live in an era of such disconnection that coming back to not just the mind, but the body, which Buddhists have always done, really gives us these tools. So you don't have to be a Buddhist. I can't do yoga to enjoy the series. But if gangsters, ex-gangsters and Buddhists are doing similar things, then you have to go, oh, okay, it's quite interesting.
It's really interesting, and I really appreciate that. Going back to basics one way or another is something really quite special about that. I'm mindful that we've reached 10:30, but I think what you've done both there with your answers is actually cover the questions from Martin, Karen and Emily, all within your answers, which were the ones that were sort of top voted remaining. What I'll also do is capture the Q&A and send it through to you both. So you've either got LinkedIn content for days and days and days, or we can find another way to answer this. And I'll also link to both of your LinkedIn profiles in the follow-up email as well for folks. So
I'll send you some books, Joe, if you choose your winners.
Yeah. Joe Glover's Post Office. It's a thing now. So I'm very happy with that. So thank you both. And thank you all for a wonderful hour. There's been some really fabulous comments in the chat from folks who weren't going to come this morning and then did come and now feel different, and they sort of said, I don't know whether that's different good or different bad right now, but I just feel different in a way that it's been impactful, and like the thing that we can try to do is have impact one way or another. So you've both done that, and we've done that collectively as a community today. So thank you all for sharing that experience and your thoughts and learnings. Something truly special, coming back down to that connection thing. So with all that said, close out today just with a big thank you to the two of you and to the community. Appreciate the hell out of you. And, I hope this day is a good one for you, and we'll see you very soon. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Katherine.